So it appears that I am live on this Saturday, the 17th of October, 2020. My name is Salsa. So I welcome you to another edition of Con Salsa Facebook and YouTube Live on this beautiful fall day. Welcome to our studio, D&J Studio. D for Divina, my beautiful bride who's upstairs, and J for yours truly, Jose Maso. As we continue celebrating 45 years of the very best in Afro-Latin music on salsa every Saturday night on WBUR 90.9 FM, National Public Radio in Boston, and on the web at WBUR.org. We also continue broadcasting live Saturday and Sunday from 4 to 6 on Facebook and YouTube. My YouTube channel is Jose Maso, so you should subscribe to that. That way you can see the whole program without interruption, because sometimes on Facebook we get interrupted. But nevertheless, whatever the two modes you're in, you are welcome to join us as we celebrate great music and, of course, have some great guests. Today, my guest will be none other than Jane Bunnett, our dear friend. She is in Canada at this moment, her homeland, and she will be joining us around 4:45 or so. We'll have a conversation with her, hear some great music, and just have a great time. Tomorrow, my guest will be Andrea Brackfield, another renowned flute player and band leader. She will be in New York, and I'll be talking to her tomorrow between 4 and 6. So that's our program for today and for tomorrow. One of our field producers, Ryan Newfall, says that he sees me and hears me, so that's good news. Thank you for that. And share this with other friends and neighbors so that way they can be part of our broadcast on this beautiful day. Saludos, mi gente. Bienvenidos a otra edición más del programa Con Salsa en Facebook y YouTube Live. Cada sábado y domingo de 4 a 6 estamos en vivo. Claro, sábado por la noche por la WBUR 90.9 FM, la difusión pública en Boston, en el internet wbur.org, de 10 a la noche hasta las 3 a la madrugada, 5 horas de programación de lo mejor de nuestra música afroantillana. Lo hemos hecho durante 45 años. Continuamos la celebración de Con Salsa, la voz, un pueblo nuevo, patria y cultura, aquí en la onda de la salsa. De cualquier manera, mi invitada para hoy es nuestra amiga Jane Bunnett, reconocida saxofonista, flautista. Ella es de Canadá, educadora, activista, también directora de una agrupación de mujeres, Maqueque. Espero que ustedes oigan la música de ellos si no la han escuchado antes. De cualquier manera, vamos a comenzar con un poco de música y luego charlamos y le damos la bienvenida a Jane Bunnett. So let's start off with some music. Let me know where you are at, where you're listening from, where you're watching us from. And if you have any questions or any comments and things of that nature, that way we can get the day started. But in any case, from time to time, I want to do a sound check, make sure that everything's working well. You'll let me know because this morning it was raining late last night. Eileen Collins, te ves y suenas muy bien. Abrazos. Te quiero mucho también, Eileen. Last night it rained here in the New England area. I mean, it was windy, powerful rain, storm type rain. And then the sun started coming out. As they say, tras la tormenta sale el sol. So that being the case, one of my favorite songs when it's sunny outside, I say, what would I sing today? Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way. One more time for Divina. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way. That's for you, Divina. Love you. God bless. Okay, let's go to some music. Stay right there. Don't go away. Vamos a la música. No se vayan.
I'm a young black man doing all that I can to stand. Oh, but when I look around and I see what's being done to my kind, every day I'm being hunted as prey. My people don't want no trouble. We've had enough struggle. I just wanna live. God protect me. I just wanna live. I just wanna live.
Here's poet Sonia Sanchez.
Hello, my name is
Sonia Sanchez. I'm going to read a poem called Catch the Fire. Sometimes I wonder what to say to you now in the soft afternoon air as you hold us all in a single death. I say, where is your fire? I say, where is your fire? You got to find it and pass it on. You got to find it and pass it on from you to me, from me to her, from her to him, from the son to the father, from the brother to the sister, from the daughter to the mother, from the mother to the child. I say, where is your fire? Can't you smell it coming out of our past? The fire of living, not dying. The fire of loving, not killing. The fire of blackness, not gangster shadows. Where is our beautiful fire that gave light to the world? The fire of pyramids, the fire that burned through the hulls of slave ships and made us breathe, the fire that made guts into chitlins, the fire that took rhythm and made jazz, the fire of sit-ins and marches that made us jump boundaries and barriers, the fire that took street talk and sounds and made righteous in Hope Tech raps. I say, where is your fire? The torch of life, full of Nzinga, and Nat Turner, and Garvey, and Harriet Tubman, and Ella Baker, and Dorothy Height, and Rosa Parks, and Harry Belafonte, and Chavez, and Du Bois, and Fannie Lou Hamer, and Martin, and Malcolm, and Mandela. Sister, sister, brother, brother, come, come, catch your fire. Don't kill. Hold your fire. Don't kill. Learn your fire. Don't kill. Be the fire. Don't kill. Catch the fire and burn with eyes that see our souls walking, singing, building, laughing, learning, loving, teaching, being. Hey, 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 young brother, brother. Hey, hey, young sister, sister. Here is my hand. Catch, 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 catch the fire and live, 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 live.
Y sigue la salsa con salsa y José Mazo. Y sigue la salsa con salsa y José Mazo.
All right. What do we start off, huh? Tremenda rumba. Comenzamos con lo nuevo de nuestro amigo Ángel Papo Vázquez, acabadito de salir. Gracias a él por brindarnos ese obsequio de esta tremenda música, en el cual viene del disco que lleva el título Chapter 10, Breaking Cover. Papo Vázquez, Mighty Pirates Troubadour. Y nos envió también una mascarilla como regalo para que estemos todos sanos y salvos en salud durante este momento de amor en los tiempos de COVID. Ahí me ven a mí con mi mascarilla. Así que le invito a ustedes que también hagan su parte cada vez que salgan. Por favor, 6 pies de distancia física y mascarilla para que de esa manera podamos sobrevivir esta pandemia. Ya son sobre 200,000 y pico que han muerto aquí en Estados Unidos. Espero que con la ayuda de Dios podamos todos sobrevivir de una manera u otra para que podamos darnos el abrazo en persona. So we just heard to start off, we heard a poem by Sonia Sanchez, and that was inspired by this series that Divina and I are watching, Lovecraft. I don't know if you're into that, but it is a series that is on HBO, and we've been watching it since the very beginning. The last episode's tomorrow, and last weekend they ended with Sonia Sanchez doing that poem. And then you heard No Te Rindas by Papo Vázquez, who sent me that mass. But let's hear some music. This is a classic, and you're going to enjoy this version of it done by our friend Jane Bunnett. Listen to this.
¿De dónde salió este son? Por cierto, muy santiaguero. ¿De dónde salió este son? Por cierto, muy santiaguero. Que tocan los integrantes del conjunto jubilado. Que tocan los integrantes del conjunto jubilado. ¿De dónde viene este son? Por cierto, muy santiaguero. ¿De dónde viene este son? Por cierto, muy santiaguero. Que tocan los integrantes del conjunto jubilado. Que tocan los integrantes del conjunto jubilado.
Pero señores, vengan a oír mi son.
Oye, mi son santiaguero.
Pero qué bueno, qué bueno, qué bueno, qué bueno, oye mi son.
Oye, mi son santiaguero.
Pero qué lindo, 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 lindo que recuerdo.
Oye, mi son santiaguero. 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 La otra noche en un café, un mulato guapetón me trató de borrachón y yo no le contesté, pero cuando me paré me formó una gritería, le hallé un trompón en la encía que dio como 20 vueltas y como no vio la puerta rompió la mampostería. Oye mi son santiaguero. Oye mi son santiaguero. Oye mi son. Oye mi son santiaguero. Oye mi son. Oye mi son santiaguero. Oye mi son. Oye mi son santiaguero.
Abre que viene el cocoyer. 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 Mamá, ¿qué fue? Mamá, ¿qué fue? Hace de frío en la calle, ae. Hace de frío en la calle, ae. Mamá, ¿qué fue? Mamá, ¿qué fue? A los carnavales de Oriente, ae. A los carnavales de Oriente, ae. Mamá se fue, mamá se fue, a los carnavales de Oriente, ae, a los carnavales de Oriente, ae.
Mary Kent says, super talented and smart, Jane Bunnett. She started collaborating with Cuban musicians years ago, yes, in the 1980s. And Jane was in Orlando back in 2018 with Maqueque. I've had the opportunity of seeing that group perform on 3 occasions. And I'm looking forward to our conversation with Jane, who's in Canada. And hopefully in the next few minutes, she'll be able to join us as we do our programming. So we heard 2 classics from her album titled Alma de Santiago. The first one was Son Santiaguero. And then after that, we heard Alma de Santiago, the title track. Then we heard Donna Lee, the famous composition, this time done a lo cubano, with a comparsa at the end. So before we continue with more music, antes de continuar con más música, ahí escucharon, miren, lo impresionante de Jane Bunnett es lo siguiente. Primero, ella es de Canadá. Número 2, toca saxofón como también flauta y en cualquier género. Pero también el hecho que cuando llegó a Cuba al principio de los 80 se enamoró de los ritmos, ella y su esposo Larry, y de la música cubana. Aquellos que han ido a Cuba, en el caso mío, yo he ido en 3 ocasiones, divina yo en 2001, 2002, 2003. Donde quiera que uno va, hay música. Donde quiera. No importa que sea en La Habana, no importa que sea en Trinidad, no importa que sea Pinal del Río, no importa dónde uno vaya, siempre va a haber música. Y cuando uno escucha esa música y ven a los músicos, veo a Jane allá backstage, que está lo más feliz de estar con nosotros. Cuando uno va a esos lugares y escucha la música, no importa de dónde uno viene, es que el ritmo le entra. Cuando nosotros llegamos a Trinidad, Viviana y yo, escuchamos una canción cuando llegamos al hotel, en el trasfondo, ahí en la piscina, estaban tocando canción. Y me enamoré de la canción. Le pregunté al hombre quién era, me dijo, mira, ese es Polo Montañez. Un montón de estrellas. Pasé por todo Trinidad y donde quiera estaban tocando la música de Polo Trinidad, de Polo Montañez. Me enamoré de su música. Nunca llegué a verlo en vivo, llegué a ver su grupo porque él falleció antes del segundo viaje nuestro. Fuimos a su casa, Divina y yo, para visitar a su hogar, pero encontramos tanta música nueva que no habíamos escuchado antes de llegar a Cuba. Pero cuando uno oye la rumba y los ritmos y todo, comparsa, todo lo demás, nunca sale igual. So I was just saying that, you know, Jane, when Mary says she's super talented and smart and she started collaborating with Cuban musicians, yes, very talented, very smart. And just like many of us, when we go to Cuba, you can't help but fall in love with the music and the rhythms, regardless of where you are. You can be in La Habana, you could be Pinal del Rio, you could be in Trinidad. It doesn't matter. You're going to Camagüey. It doesn't matter where you go. Cienfuegos, it doesn't matter where you go. There's going to be music in the streets, and you're going to fall in love with it. And there you heard some examples of that, right? And when you heard her do the version of Donna Lee that way, where you end up with a comparsa, if you've ever been to a comparsa in Cuba, you know that energy that you heard there in that recording. That is the way it feels. That is the way it feels. But changing subjects for 1 second. Today is Saturday, the 17th of October. I believe we have 17 days left, ladies and gentlemen, those of us living in the United States, before November 3rd and Election Day. Now, here in the state of Massachusetts, today was the first day for early voting. Early voting. So you have options. Option number one, you can do early voting starting today. Go to your precinct, your poll station, and vote. Or if you want to wait until November 3rd to vote in person, you can do that as well. Or you can do mail-in. My recommendation at this tight figure, 17 days, if you can do early voting in person or vote on the 3rd, please do so. It's important that we get out the vote, that all of us who are eligible to vote, who can vote, do our duty by voting. And I'm hoping and praying that you'll do the right thing. You'll do the right thing. I was reading someplace earlier this week lamenting the fact that during the last 3.5, close to 4 years, there have been, from my understanding and the person who wrote it understanding, none whatsoever any type of arts activities at the White House. I was watching a special on Luis Miranda, the father of Lin-Manuel Miranda, when Lin-Manuel Miranda went to the White House at the invitation of Barack Obama and Michelle Obama. And for the first time, he recited one of the poems from Hamilton. And I was saying, I haven't seen anything that has to do with arts or music at the White House. So think about that for a second, okay? But let's hear some music. Listen to this beautiful rendition. Here you have Hilario Duran on the piano and the one and only Jane Bunnett accompanying him on flute. Listen to this.
caballero.
Alma de Santiago,
Una que dice así,
alma de Santiago,
una melodía bonita que yo la oí.
alma de Santiago,
¡Juega!
alma de
Bueno,
Santiago,
Juanita, así.
alma de Santiago,
Y yo como rumbero todavía no soy. ¡Juega, Juanita!
alma de Santiago,
Juanita, que toca bonito. ¡Juega!
alma de Santiago.
Ayude a prevenir el COVID-19 con distanciamiento social. Use el teléfono, FaceTime o mensajes en línea para comunicarse con sus amigos y familiares. Quédese en su casa el mayor tiempo posible. No se reúna en grupos. Manténgase a una distancia de 6 pies o 2 metros de las demás personas. Evite estrechar las manos o dar abrazos. Y por favor, continúe lavándose las manos con frecuencia. Visite mass.gov/COVID-19 o llame al 211. Un mensaje del Departamento de Salud Pública de Massachusetts.
as we, the beautiful sounds of Jane Bunnett and Makeke from their album Odara. El Chivo is what you're listening to in the background. And with that as a background, let me put up some shout outs very quick. Sussy and Johnny made it in. Happy Saturday, Jose. Thank you from California. Sussy and Johnny, thank you for tuning in. From Cartagena, gracias, Heriberto. El abrazo de Puerto Rico, Jaime. El abrazo para ti también. Mara, God willing, and all of us. Hopefully, in the very near future, we'll have the opportunity to enjoy Jane and Makeke once again at one of the clubs here in the area or wherever you might be watching the show at this moment. Tom Ehrlich, thank you as well for tuning in. And before I bring our dear friend Jane on, who's in Canada, by the way, I want to make note about what we just heard. Saludos, Michael Martinez. Greetings to you too. That last song before the one you hear in the background came from their first CD, Jane Bunnett and Makeke. And we heard the title track, written by Jane, released in 2014. And Makeke, a beautiful word and the name of this newly formed all-female touring group. These are the liner notes written by Jane. Makeke means the spirit of a young girl in the ancient Afro-Cuban dialect. With this group, we intend to evoke the spirit of Makeke. When searching for a name for the group, we turned to Daime Arocena's grandmother, who is a practitioner of the Afro-Cuban religion, for her advice, and she came up with this evocative name which perfectly describes the musicians in our music. Daime Arocena was a vocalist, and of course, that was the first time we had a chance of seeing her perform, sing, and of course, we've become big fans of hers since then. But it was thanks to Jane Bunnett who made that possible. And as we bring Jane on board, there she is backstage. Now she's joining me here. Ladies and gentlemen, Jane, I don't have one of those machines that automatically plays applause when you come on. So, but I'm hoping that the people who are watching are giving you their round of applause. Si están, aquellos que estén en sus hogares o donde quiera que estén, por favor, un aplauso para nuestra invitada Jane Bunnett, que ha sido tan gentil de dar su tiempo. Se encuentra en Canadá y para esta tarde se encuentra con nosotros aquí en vivo. So Jane, you're looking well. It's good to see you. I got a note from Larry earlier saying that he'll be tuning in. So I'm going to need you to center a little bit so we can see you even better because you're a little off camera there. Go towards, nope, the other way. Go the other way. There
Everything's
you go.
backwards, right?
Yeah, okay. Well, there we see you. You're looking well, my friend. And here's a first big round of applause right there. Eileen Collins gives you applause, and she says, bienvenida to you as well. And from California, Ceci and Johnny do the same. From Florida, you get the applause from Victor and company. So people are welcoming you to this program. And it's such a pleasure to have you, Jane. You know, when I hear that song, I think about a couple of things. Number one, I think about you and how are you doing these days of love during the time of COVID-19. So let me start off with that. How are you? Okay. All right,
I'm okay, thank you. Yeah, it's it's a tough time for everybody. I feel that I'm certainly a lot better off than my band that's in Cuba right now, in Havana, Cuba. They're in a pretty serious lockdown there, and a lot of food shortages and a really, really stressful life. I'm up here in the woods right now. I'm up in nature, and I feel pretty fortunate to be in a good place, sort of toughen this thing out.
And so when you say the band, we're talking about Makeke, of course, from Cuba. And we have heard from friends. We have a dear friend, Anara Frank, who had told us that the situation there is pretty grave when it comes to the necessities. That if it was bad before, it's even worse now.
Yes, it's very tough. They moved now. They've got rid of the convertible peso. And so a lot of the food has to be bought in US dollars, which is, of course, puts pressure on families outside of Cuba to put this money on these cards that they go into the stores and are able to buy, necessities that they need at, of course, overinflated prices.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a lot of like lineups, big lineups for just very the very, very simple things that we take for granted. They line up. Apparently, the girls have been telling me they'll line up for something that will come on, for example, chicken. Come once a month, they're able to buy chicken, and the lineup starts about midnight the night before. Families take turns sort of standing in line, and there's a lot of just a stress, around just feeding, putting food on the table. So most of the band is in Cuba. Two of the girls are in Toronto, and I'm here in Canada. And but yeah, we're trying to keep in touch with them and do whatever we can, to help them there, till we all get reunited again and start playing. But we have actually, to be honest, we have actually done a couple of online shows, trading files. It's not quite the same, but it's making the best of salvaging maybe, a very mammoth tour that we had going for the next year and a half, 2 years. A lot of touring in Europe, and of course a lot of touring in the United States. And so we managed to keep a couple of university shows on board, and just doing our performances, doing our recordings, the three of us in Toronto, sending the files to Cuba, along with the video footage, and they videotape, besides doing the recording in a socially distanced place, of course. And then the files come back, and it's all edited together, and out it goes. For example, we did a show just last month for Emory College in Atlanta, and we were supposed to be there. Our touring, it was a kind of ironic, because we were to leave on tour, I think it was the second week of March, when our first date was actually the show we just did at Emory College in Atlanta, Georgia. And we were supposed to be there a week, doing a residency and a performance. So we brought the girls a couple weeks out. We brought them from Cuba, and everybody was in the house for a couple of weeks, and they went, I guess it was for their interview at the U.S. Embassy in Toronto, because that's where they have to go to be processed so we can enter the States, get the visas once the approval notice is approved. Our petition is approved. So it was rather ironic, because on the Friday, the visas had been okay, and the girls went in to pick up their visas, which we paid for. And a few hours later, everything canceled. So the girls, that was it. We were to leave on tour on I guess a Monday or Tuesday, and we were already a little stressed if we were even going to get the visas, period. And then COVID hit, and we were actually Larry and I were actually, my producer husband, trumpet player, we were actually on our way back from Belize, and the girls were all living in our house. So so we got back thinking that we're going to go off on this tour. Anyway, everything canceled, and the girls, I think, were around for another week, because we were having, issues getting them back to Cuba. We ended up getting them back on the last Air Canada flight, where there was 10 people on the flight. So they basically made it just back in time to be able to quarantine in their own homes. The day after that, apparently, anybody who came from outside back into Cuba had to go into a public quarantine building, and they're pretty god awful.
I can imagine.
So they felt fortunate to be able to go to their homes.
So when was your actual last live performance with Makeke? What date was that? Can you remember? It was in this new year. It must have been after either January. Was it January?
No, you know what? We played New Year's in San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
That was great. New Year's night. That was a just spectacular night at Freight and Salvage, and we played with one of the, just doing a blank on the group's name. They're pretty well-known group in San Francisco. Wonderful guy. And his band was terrific. So we had a really marvelous night. And then I think we had a few dates in Feb, and I can't even remember where we were. I really can't remember. It's a kind of a blur. So February, we did a bunch of dates. We had two-week, I think, 2-week tour in the U.S. It was, and then the girls went back to Cuba a week. Larry and I went to Belize, and then we came together, and everything, boom.
So early in the year, you had at least a couple of experiences playing with the band, and now they're in Cuba. So before we get deep into a conversation, here are some other welcomes. You've got a welcome, Jane from Kathy and her husband, Stephen Whitney, our dear friend, percussionist, says welcome. Elizabeth Swag also says welcome. So you've got a few fans here saying welcome to the show. So I'm going to share a photo with you because this one, next week I think will be the anniversary of the passing of this gentleman right here, Freddie Taylor. And that's you and I.
Thinking about him.
Yeah, that's you and I with Freddie after your gig on this occasion here when you introduced us to Makeke. And the reason why that performance stands out for me was that I had just gotten out of a health issue. I'd had nasopharyngeal cancer, and I had gone through 33 days of treatment. It was radiation treatment and chemo. And that was one of the first possibilities for me to go out and about and enjoy some music. And this was memorable, right? Because that was the first time I got to see Makeke, and I was just like, I fell in love with him. And it was just that the music really like touched every single part of my body and soul. And the fact that you and I spent some time with Fred at the end, now that he's passed, I remember that moment. It stuck with me, right? It stayed with me. And part of what stayed with me was the fact that here you were, someone from Canada who, with your husband, trumpet player, producer, went to Cuba for the first time. When was that? 1982. And like many people who travel to Cuba, even those who are not musicians, it's just a life-changing experience. So before we go into your venture into Cuba, what was music like for you from the moment you started playing to the moment you went to Cuba? So that gap, not Cuba yet. We haven't got to Cuba. What was music?
Well, that's interestingly enough, I was studying classical piano, so for a long time I was very focused on being a piano player, and then certain issue took me that I developed a tendonitis, and I went to San Francisco, and I was very lucky. Was there for a couple of weeks, and I got to hear Charles Mingus's group over repeated nights, like about 4 or 5 nights in a row, and that was just pivotal for me. I wasn't really playing jazz. I had a flute, and I was sort of jamming with friends on the weekend, a couple of guys on guitar and a bass, and I just, noodle because I played it in my last year of high school. And I really enjoyed it. But then I had this classical life of playing this music, working very, very hard towards that. Anyway, I developed a tendonitis, and after this trip that I had, and hearing Mingus so many nights, and I had been exposed to Mingus before. It wasn't my first time, but it was just all a timing thing. I'd gone to San Francisco just to take a break from the piano and to see if that helped with the tendonitis. When I returned from that trip, I had pretty much made up my mind I wanted to play jazz, and but I didn't really know how to go about it. There was not university programs at that point at all, and so I felt like I didn't fit the picture, whatever the picture is of, the demographic of being a jazz musician. But I still really wanted to do it. And I had been exposed to jazz. I liked all kinds of music, but I was starting to lean more towards jazz, having this classical reference. And when I heard Mingus's group, I thought they were all classical musicians, but that's what had been their training, and that now they were playing jazz. I'd always had a laugh about that with Don Pullen, the great late Don Pullen, the piano player who was with Mingus for many years, because he thought that was so funny. But anyway, I eventually made my way meeting some other like-minded players and would get together, and I started to sort of transition. I ended up finishing my piano studies, but playing a little bit of jazz piano, not very good, and jamming, but now more in a jazz context. And shortly after that, I met Larry. So I met Larry in about 1978, it would be 77, 78. And when I met him, the first time I met him wasn't so great because he's, anyway, but the second time I met him, I realized, he had such passion for the music, and he was playing trumpet, and he was already out there doing it. And he also had a spectacular record collection. He had been working at a store, which is like a J&R, but called Sam the Record Man, which was like for us, like a university. Going to Sam the Record Man was like a university because it had people like yourself. You had people that were experts in the music in those divisions of the music departments in the store. Really knew. So I would go there and say, what's this guy Charlie Parker sound like? Or what does this guy, this person, Lester Young, what's he sound like? And they put the records on. And so anyway, the combination of that and then meeting Larry, and that just sort of spiraled me into being more assisted, and giving me a course in the music. And then from there, I met a pianist named Marilyn Lerner, wonderful piano player, and we became friends, and we started to go out to places. Like I was learning standards, and I was playing standards and trying to learn all that repertoire that's so American songbook, that so many jazz musicians use to improvise off of. And so anyhow, we would go to places like, she had an electric piano, or if the place had a piano, and the two of us would go in there and say, we would actually initiate gigs for ourselves. So it would be a place that didn't even have music. And we say, business would be so much better if you had a little duo and you're playing. So
That's real. Yeah.
we started out doing that, for like $25 and $50. And then we hit upon a place that was called Harper's, where we got playing 6 nights a week. It was unbelievable. It was like, and we were getting paid, and we were basically getting paid to like practice in front of people and learning this repertoire. And that really, that started to give me more and more confidence doing that, of course. And I loved doing that. A little bit later, as I started to probably get a little bit better, Larry and I started to think about, he was already out playing in a group called Shocks Johnson and the Jive Bombers, and that was sort of a Louis Jordan, group, and it was really great. And they were playing around, and I was just starting to get my feet wet. But I was playing at a jam session one night of a well-known saxophonist named Jim Galloway, sort of in more of a trad style. He passed away, but he was having a 50th birthday party, which puts it all in perspective. And I played that night. I sat in on a couple of tunes, and a local DJ, quite well-known guy named Ted O'Reilly from our Jazz 91 station, CJRT, heard me, and a couple months later called me to play a series, which was a very prestigious series that happened in Toronto at one of our museum type places called the Ontario Science Centre. And it was recorded. It was recorded for radio, and it was always reviewed. It was a general for our newspaper, the Globe and Mail, always reviewed. So we knew we were going to get reviewed. And we took this really, really seriously, thank goodness. And this was like, to get this phone call was like, whoa, this is really, really special. And we prepared and prepared. We were going down to New York. Both of us were studying with the great pianist Barry Harris. And so we would take the bus down and sit in on his terrific classes. He's one of the greatest, teachers, exponents of the bebop music, which is, I think, so important to a jazz musician's foundation. And we heard Tony Williams that night. And both of us was like, wow, we got to get, when we sponsor, we got to get a great drummer. And we used a guy, wonderful player who's mysteriously has disappeared, named Claude Roger. And everybody was really afraid of Claude because he was a very, wild, crazy, very unpredictable personality. But he was a great drummer and really fiery. And so I called him up. I've always been kind of nervy because I was always taught by my mom, the worst thing somebody can say is no. Nobody would ever call Claude to play, like hardly anybody, because they were afraid of him. So I called him up and he was like, sure, I'd love to play. And so we did this concert and it got very well reviewed. And from there, we started to think about making our first record. So our first record,
before you go to your first record, before you go to your first record, so were you playing saxophone and flute, or were you just performing on saxophone?
Well, there's a funny story. I was playing flute when I entered, like when I started playing jazz. Then I went a little bit later. They did start a small music program at the university called York University. And in my first month up there, I fell and broke my ankle. And I was hobbling around on crutches. I really wanted to play the soprano sax. I'd heard Steve Lacy. I heard Coltrane. I loved this mysterious sound of the soprano sax. And really, I gravitated towards that instrument, but I didn't own one. And so I had this fall. Somebody in the administrative department saw me hobbling around on crutches up on the university campus. And this is where I actually really met Larry too, and sort of we formed our relationship there. I was hobbling around and she said, oh, that's terrible. And I said, yeah, I did it here. And she said, really? Well, you should go into the administration because you could get money for this. I don't know this way to buy an instrument, but anyhow, I went in and I filled out the forms, and it was an out of court settlement because it was their fault that I had slipped on these stairs. They were mossy and slippery. And I bought my soprano sax for $763 or something like that. So I was then playing both flute and saxophone. So this is around late 1978. Yeah, it actually was 1978 because I still have the receipt for the saxophone. So yes. And then much later, I started playing alto and tenor because there was, gigs that would come up where you would have to play all those instruments if it was like a musical or all sorts of things where you had to double. Much later, I decided that, and I think it was Larry who sort of suggested, I really think you should just like really focus. As 2 instruments is a lot, so just like really focus on these 2 and really get good. So yeah, we made our first recording, and when we did our first recording, it was pretty important to us. At that point, I was playing, mostly more modern jazz. I really gravitated to the, later Coltrane records and Ornette Coleman and these much more freer music. It was only with the adventure of studying the music that I started it always happens, right, with a lot of students, right? You read about somebody who's your hero, and then you read who your hero listened to. And so you go back and you check that out, and then you check that person out, and then so I started to do that, and I started to get much more rounded sense of the music, and that's how I started to really enjoy bebop. But I came from like hearing things like Sam Rivers and this pretty kind of far out sounding jazz, but so I came from there, and I loved Pullen, and I'd heard him on some solo records on the Sackville label, and of course with Mingus and Dewey Redman. I loved his music. I'd heard he with Ornette Coleman and Old and New Dreams, and playing with Keith Jarrett and Pat Metheny, and so when it came time to make our first LP, which was called In Due Time, which was a piece of music that Larry, my husband, wrote for in dedication to Dewey Redman, the great late Dewey Redman, tenor saxophonist. Pullen was in town playing a solo gig for the jazz festival in Toronto, and very, very boldly went up to him on the break and said that I was preparing for my first recording and we consider playing on it. And well, he said, you know how I play? And I said, yeah, that's what I love. I love how you play. And he said, well, I'll think about it. Send me the music. So I dodged him. Like I dogged him, excuse me. I dogged him for months, calling him, leaving messages. I would be in New York, Larry and I would be down there studying with Barry. I'd call, and I don't know if he was on the road or just didn't want to deal with me. But finally I got him. And I'll never forget him saying to me, oh, you are so persistent. So he must have been getting my messages. So he finally said, yes, I have listened to your tape, because I gave him this tape that we made at this concert that I was mentioning to you at this live radio show. This little tape just became so much that we made. So I gave it to Don and gave him some sheets of music, and that were the pieces that we played at the show. And eventually he said yes. At the same time, I didn't know if we were going to get Don, but then Dewey was playing in Toronto with Charlie Hayden. And the same deal, he was doing a duet concert. It was just a tenor and bass. And right after the show, I beelined it down really fast into the green room where Dewey was packing up his horn. I introduced myself and said, I was making my first record, blah, blah, blah. Would he consider playing on it? And he said, sure, give me the music and maybe, and blah, 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 blah. In the end, we got both of them on our first recording in due time. So
Wow.
that was something that for a long time we prepared the music for it. And we did a show in Toronto with both Dewey and Don Pullen. And then we went into the studio and we made our first record. So that was the start of the whole thing. Yeah, that was. And so I came at it much more from a modern jazz. But at the same time, I was mentioning to you that I was playing tenor. I started playing tenor sax because there was other things, and the alto. And I got called. It was a Colombian, a really wonderful guy named Ramiro Puerta, who unfortunately has now passed. And he had a group called Ramiro's Latin Orchestra that he was assembling, and he asked me to play in the band. Well, and often in those days, and that a lot of the time the horn players would be, gringos, because they could read a lot of these people, the musicians would bring their charts from, let's say, Colombia or Peru or Puerto Rico, different places, and bring the charts and need the horn players that could improvise on the montunos and play the parts, and we're pretty good readers. That those days have changed, but in the early formation of some of these salsa groups, there was 3-4 white guys, and everybody else was from somewhere else. Nobody in the band was from Cuba. Everybody was, someone from Argentina, someone from Chile, Peru, Ramiro being from Colombia. And so I started to get a little taste of this Afro Latin music, which I loved it. And even when I was playing classical piano, the music that I always gravitated towards were the Spanish composers. It was really interesting. Alberto Ginastera and Villa-Lobos, and even Debussy and Ravel had inflections of Latin music. Sometimes, they had this little tinge in the music with the syncopations, and I always loved that. So when I started to play that music, I started to get a taste for it, and I was still playing, doing the jazz thing, but occasionally going out and playing with Ramiro. But then the first trip came. Larry and I went to Cuba, and that was it. That was the tipping point. Like you just said, it's like a lightning bolt. I had no idea the music was so rich, so deep. Like Jose, in the first day that we were there, in the first just few hours, I heard four different types of music. Got into at that we went to Santiago de Cuba, our first trip, 82. Got into the airport, and there was a trio playing while we were waiting for our bags. And we got out, got our bags, and there was a septeto playing as we got onto the bus. And then we went an hour and a half into our tourist compound. And when we got to the tourist compound, got off the bus, there was a comparsa, a carnival group, like going around the bus with congas and corneticina and people like chanting these things. And I was like, Larry and I were like, wait, we're in Africa now. We're in the wrong place. We're in another place. Where are we? And then that night, packing our bags, I was hearing this music, and I walked up a hill. It was a brand new hotel, and there was like 10 people in the hotel. It was hardly anyone, and motel type place. And I walked up the hill, and there was an 18-piece song montuno group playing, and the guys were all dressed in beautiful white, guarabiras, and it was like 2 trumpets and 2 trombones and 3 saxophones. It was just like, it was unbelievable. And there was like 4 of us, listening to it. I ran back and got Larry. We came back with our horns. And the trumpet player who became one of our dearest friends, who unfortunately just passed away a few years ago, he was not only a symphonic player, but he played that very, very much typical Cuban trumpet sound, which is so special. And he was a great musician. Paisan Mallet was his name. And he was also very deeply into the Afro-Cuban folkloric. I mean, he was just one of the most well-rounded musicians we ever met. And he sort of looked down at our horn cases and sort of like, come on up here and let's see what you could do. And us being keeners and not knowing any better, but still up we went and jumped in on the montunos, because we had a little bit of an idea what to do when those sections came up.
Yeah.
And the next day we traveled into Santiago and hooked up with Paisan and spent the whole day with him. And we were friends for forever and ever after that. And he became a great teacher in many ways about the music of that region, because that's, of course, very
Santiago,
specific.
Yep.
Yeah, the Oriente was very, very special. And then we came back. We came back with tons of records and LPs, and some of the great descargas, and people like the Frank Emilios and the Cachows and stuff. And then there was a drummer on a lot of these sessions named Guillermo Barreto. And we were like, we found out that he was still alive through a friend who somehow had a connection to him. And 3 weeks later, we went to Havana and hooked up with Guillermo, and his wife was the great, great singer, one of the greatest all-time singers, Mercedes Valdez. So for Larry and I...
Let's pause on the Havana trip. Stay right there. Take a breath. Hold on a second. No te vayas. Por aquí tenemos saludos. Mira, por aquí dice Angelina de Perú, dice... Qué gusto ver la maestra Jane Bunnett. Gracias por todo lo que hace por la música cubana y latina. Victor pregunta, how was the group formed? Who were your earliest influences? Well, you're listening to that now, Victor. She's sharing that. And we'll get to how Maqueca was formed. Jaime, our friend, te envía saludos. Jaime, who does the show Lo Mejor del Jazz Tropical every Sunday. I have a greeting here for you from Dimas Sanchez. Saludos, Jane.
Hey, my friend.
Pedro Salsa wants to
Beautiful
know.
guy.
He wants to know about a song titled Yo Canto Odara. What was the reason why you recorded it, and if it's something that you wrote? So we'll get to that as well. Elvin, saludos, Elvin Cruz. Elvin de Salsa Tropical. Our dear friend Chembo Corniel, te envía saludos to you and to Larry as well. Leonidas, Jane is great, a Canadian fabulous musician. Her spirit of Havana Records is a must-have. Yes, they are a must-have. You've got to have it. Alex Rodriguez, our dear son, our dear friend, not our son, but our dear friend, our mentor, says, love it, Jose. So those are some of the comments that we've got. So you did Santiago, you were injected, and like I've said, como yo le he dicho a ustedes, mire, cuando uno va a Cuba, no importa qué pensamiento tenga uno antes de llegar, el momento que llega es un cambio que impacta su vida por el resto de su vida. Es lo que dice en inglés, es a life-changing experience. O sea, el momento que uno llega, créanme, su vida jamás será igual. Jamás será igual. I was saying, when you go to Cuba, it's life-changing, right? It's like, whoever you were before you got there, you're not the same person when you leave, and you never will be the same person when you leave. And if you keep going back, you're obviously going to morph into a very, very different person with every trip that you go, which is the case that happened to Vina and I. And we only went 3 times, in 2001, 2002, 2003, but we've never been the same since we went to Cuba. Never been the same.
Wow.
So you did Santiago. Now you're in Havana, Mercedes. But I mean, you're meeting some of the royalty. You had mentioned some of the folks that you met in the jazz world that would keep anybody like. Just with that alone, you would have said, okay, I've done enough. I've met some of the greatest. But the fact that you met now Guillermo and his wife, let's talk about Havana.
Yeah. Well, that was of course just so pivotal because Guillermo was a very, very special man. He was a teacher. He had broken through a lot of racial barriers. Late 40s and 50s, more so playing at, the places like the Tropicana, the Hotel Riviera, Sanssouci. He was the sort of go-to jazz drummer. He was sort of modeled himself after Joe Jones. He loved swing. He loved that music, American music, so much, and he was a big part of Los Amigos, along with Frank Emilio and Pichao in those early Descarga records. And he was a great, great teacher. And he had played with people like Nat King Cole and Sarah Vaughan, people that demanded that he be the drummer on the gigs. In fact, I don't think King Cole played with any other drummer except Guillermo. And his wife, Mercedes, she was not only a great popular singer, but she was one of the most profound interpreters of the Yoruba, the Afro-Cuban, singing for the Orishas. And so she had she was on 2 roads with her music, both very popular in some of these shows. In fact, I think she played the Apollo Theater with a troupe that came from Havana. But she was also very much looked up to for her depth and her interpretation and knowledge of the Afro-Cuban chants. And because of those 2 musicians, we were really introduced firsthand, like with the purest form of the music. And from there, they introduced us to, we met Bobby Carcassés, and of course, Frank Emilio, later Hilario Duran. And we started meeting more musicians and going to Maxime's, which was this great jazz club that was happening there. And, I met Maraca, he was like 15 years old. And it was just, for us, it was just incredible. And from there, at that point, we started, I think the next year, 1990, 91, it was the last year of the Havana Jazz Festival of Arturo being director of it. And Dizzy Gillespie was there and Carmen McRae. I think Chico Freeman was there. And we brought Don Pullen with us. So it was Larry and myself and Don Pullen with Bobby Carcassés and Bobby Carcassés's group at the time. And we did some concerts at the Jazz Festival, and we got a taste of like this collaborative thing of like actually working with the Cuban musicians. And that's when we started to form. I think we had at that point, let me see, just one record out. Our first record was In New Time, and I think our next record that we did was then Spirits of Havana, which was like such a, for many musicians that knew us, was like, whoa,
180.
where's that
180.
coming?
Sure, that was a 180. Totally a 180.
Yeah, it was a totally
Yeah,
180. From this
180.
like avant-garde kind of thing to like all of a sudden, and it was like, what's that cowbell all about? Like, what's happened with that? And then, so we worked very hard for 2 years cutting through the red tape, not only on Havana's side, because, for example, Mercedes was working with, at that point, with a group It was all rumberos that had formed called Yoruba and Dabo. And that group, they were primarily had been dock workers that started to form, their musical social activity was when they weren't working, they were playing together in this group. And Mercedes, that became her group to perform with, or one of the groups one of her main groups that she started performing with. And when we heard them, we went to a performance and they were like, it was spectacular. It was so raw and real and, so much heart in it. That we decided to put them, we started to form this record and the four of us sitting down together. So it was Mercedes, Guillermo, and Larry and I. And this, this gave us this great excuse to keep going back to Cuba and hanging out in their apartment and drinking rum and talking about this record that we were going to make. And it finally happened. And it was remarkable. So we made that record between, it was 1990. And then we did the record and we, surprisingly enough, got a Juno Award for that, which was like the American Grammy in Canada. And that summer, we brought everybody to play on the first stage, an outdoor stage, which was the WOMAD stage. It was the first, we actually opened up the whole, the opening of the whole venue, outdoor venue, and it was a free show. And we brought everybody in. And unfortunately, at that point, Guillermo had passed away very suddenly. That was a very sad thing from a heart attack. And so he wasn't on board in that show, but we brought Hilario Duran, Yoruba and Dabo, and guitar player Armand Barroso, who's in Miami now. And I said, Hilario Duran, yes, and Mercedes. And we did this show, and it was just, mind blowing for us to do this. It was like a very dream, just like a dream, just that came just real. Like it was just to go from 1982 and having taken this vacation to all of a sudden having 18 people on a stage and a record that we made. It was really a marvelous experience. And that just caught the bug. And then sort of jumping ahead, we made a number of other records after that. One called Havana Flute Summit, which was with Richard Egways and Maraca on flute too. And then we did Rhythmo and Soul, which was that with Daphne Prieto and young player Lukumi, and oh my goodness, and Pedrito Martinez. We did a record with Pedrito in the mix. We then founded, shortly after we did this very first record called Spirits of Havana, we started the foundation of the name for our group, which was we kept the group called Spirits of Havana. This Spirits of Havana has become sort of a revolving sort of springboard for so many musicians have come through or have played with us, like Elio Villafranca, and I mentioned Pedrito Martinez. He played with us on our Chamalongo record, like it was 17 or 18 years old. And Yosvani Terry and Junior Terry and Daphne Prieto, as I mentioned. There's been so many players that have come through, David Varese. So many players. So that's been a great experience to be able to have had this foundation, to be able to have a little bit of momentum. To mention that there was a question about, I think, Yo Sempre Odara. That was from our first recording, Spirits of Havana. And that piece was written by the great Guillermo Barreto.
Yep.
For me, it was sort of a gift for the recording. And Yo Sempre Odara is like a mixing up the Spanish bit of Afro-Cuban, Afro dialect Lukumi. Odara mean force, strength, and energy. So always forever strong and happy. And that's a piece that we've kind of continued to play. And Mercedes just sang it so great. And then the piece Spirits of Havana, that was a collaborative piece between Guillermo and Larry. They wrote that piece together for us. And wow, man, it's just since
Now,
then, it's just
so
we
so
made a
before,
film.
yeah, before we go to the next chapter, a couple questions. So let's talk about, so you are now have become immersed. You're like you're seeping all this knowledge from Guillermo, from Mercedes, and everybody else that you come across. You're watching performers perform. You're jamming with these performers. So now your chops are getting even stronger in this genre. Um, did you, and you were traveling there in person, so it wasn't like the first year you brought your albums back home and you were listening to every single album that you picked up, and you picked up this from Richard Edwards, and you picked up this from whomever, and you picked up this from whomever, et cetera, et cetera. But being in person and performing with these artists, how did that start changing your style of playing both saxophone and flute? That's question number one. Then I have a second question having to do with that performance of Spirits of Havana back in Canada. So how did that influence the style or change it, if anyway?
Wow. Well, the first thing that really hit me, of course, with the music was the rhythm, just how important rhythm is. And I mean, when you when you listen to the great jazz artists, of course, rhythm, you listen to Max Roach and the drummers, the great drummers, the Tony Williams, the Elvin Jones. It's all about the rhythm, really. Um, and so that impacts your sound. You keep that um, as the basis of the strength of really working with the rhythms of the music. And especially with the Afro-Cuban folkloric music, that was strangely enough as how in jazz that I started from the most extreme
Mm-hmm.
modern jazz and enjoying that, and then coming into the inside of the music and getting more of an understanding with the Afro-Cuban jazz. It was going right to the root of hearing the Afro-Cuban folkloric. So the first music I was really hearing was, Mercedes and the chants and these beautiful melodies that you don't you as a musician, and of course if you have a musical sensibility, you'll hear the harmonies in your head. You're hearing the bata patterns, but you're hearing these very, very beautiful chants, and they allow so much harmonic intervention, to mix harmonic concepts up, which are come out of jazz and modern and European music, basically. They're just these beautiful, the way you can adapt. So that was the first thing that hit me about the. And I'm Larry too. I mean, we so when we first heard Pedrito Martinez sing, we were just in a very informal setting with Mercedes, so we didn't know who this guy was.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just we were playing, and he came to the session, and he opened his mouth and he
Mm-hmm.
sang, and this sound came out of this guy who was like 17 years old, and it was unbelievable. And it was just something special. And so all of these moments, like, they just impact your musical sensibility of just how music moves you. And so these very bare bones roots music, I then, because the first, I'd only knew who Santiago, and we only knew Havana. And then when the opportunity came in 2000, National Film Board of Canada, which is kind of like a PBS type thing, but it had luckily government monies to proceed with projects. We embarked on this documentary film, and this film allowed us to travel the whole interior of Cuba. And then we started to hear that there was such a regional thing happening from province to province. So Santiago was one thing. Havana was another thing. And then even our time in Havana, when we started to meet like different composers like Jose Maria Vitier, who's a, more so a classical composer. And then we met, all these different people that were doing very unique musics, because I don't want to say it's because they were cut off, but there was like a certain Afro-Cuban centrism, if that's the right word, to all of the music, even the classical music had this Afro sensibility. And so there was something uniting all the provinces,
that was
but
the
there was
thread.
something different about them all too. So it was just like you just said, like every time you go, there was like some new discovery. It didn't stop. Even going outside of Havana, a little place called Perico, there was like a music it's not Palo, but I just can't get the word right now, but unfortunately, but it's a specialty once again. And there's only a few very small minority of people that are playing that music. You go to Guantanamo, you hear the Changui, and that's a whole other thing. So all of these, every discovery just opened up another color field, another door of tools or things to work with, to engage into more interesting, more rich, but still keeping within the Afro-Cuban thing.
That was the thread. That was the thread. So I imagine as you're exploring this, and now through the possibility of doing it, because you did this film, right, where you're actually documenting what you're learning and integrating that in, not only into your intellectual capacity to explain the music and understand it, but also to play it as well, because now you knew, okay, this is what we're doing and this is how I fit in, or how this music fits into what I'm trying to do, etc. So when you went back to Canada with that first trip of Spirit of Havana, you said that people responded to you like saying, what was that? That was a 180. How did the audience respond to your group? Especially since
Very
you were the
mixed.
opening, you were the opening act for the Womack. How did they respond?
It was interesting. There were some people that were really
Was this like a Bob Dylan moment at Newport when he started playing
I
electric
think
guitar
so.
for the
I
folk?
personally think it was. I really do. There was, a lot of cars in the parking lot across the street, places like Chicago and New York. A lot of people heard Mercedes was going to be there, and Yoruba and Dabo was going to be there. Poopy, I don't know if you ever knew that dancer, but he had a whole bunch of fans. He was the dancer with Yoruba and Dabo, later settled in New York and became one of the great dance teachers there. But he was on the tour, and it was really interesting because the hipsters, the people that were really informed, were mostly the Americans. There was a few Canadians that were like, this is amazing. But you have to remember, at this point, tourism has not opened up in Cuba. It's nothing like what it is with Canadians now, because so many Canadians go to Cuba and they all know a band. They've all got a band that they want to bring to Toronto. They're engaged with Cuban music. At this point, nobody heard any Cuban music. And the bata drums, the dancing, when the dancers came out and did Alagua, I mean, people were just saying, the knife is going on the tongue, and then people are like looking horrified, like, what the hell is that? and then, but the worst one, the best one was, we did this whole. I thought it was a beautiful show the way we did it. We brought it in with very peacefully with Oshun and piano, Mercedes and I, and then we built the show up, and then it went into a more jazz. It was very folkloric, and then it went to a sort of more jazzy kind of thing, and then ended up with sort of like a conga kind of, like the dancers. Well, the dancers basically came out in fishnet high heels after doing Oshun and Alaguana, and of course the G strings, and there was like a lot of feminist reaction, like, well, they didn't have to resort to that. That was really terrible. And I was like, I'm sorry, folks, this is Cuba. But it was an incredible experience, and we actually have the videotape of that show, and at some points they pan on the audience. They're on the stage, and then they pan on the audience, and the face up. There's a few faces that are sitting there smiling, like, and there's some that are just totally dumbfounded, like, what is this? So anyhow, and now there's so many Cubans in there's a Cuban scene, but at that point there was no Cuban.
Sure. No, it was just the beginning. It was the beginning.
It was funny, Jose. Oh my God, it was like, and a lot of our musician friends were like, that cowbell, like what is that cowbell? Like, why is that gotta be all through everything? Why is it in everything? Because it is.
So, yeah, I mean, you were introducing them to a different palette of musical tastes. So at the same time, I'm sure many of them now understand why they want to use the cowbell if they want to slide into that genre. We're going to hear a cut in the background. Melissa said, Saludos, Jose. I remember Jane performing in Paris at the New Morning Club in 1990 with Alfredo Rodriguez and Azuquita. And then look at this. Look at this answer. Larry answers. Larry answers saying the great memories of touring with him in Europe. Last time that we saw him was at the Barranquilla Jazz Festival a few months before he passed. Great descarga that night with Los Papines, Isaac Delgado, Alfredo, and us. Sweet person and great musician. That, of course, being Larry. So let's put a little music.
Thanks, Larry.
And this was sort of like set the tone. Del disco titulado Tierra Firme, Jane Bunnett y Maqueque, canción que lleva el título Habana de Noche. Jane Bunnett y su agrupación musical. Jane en la flauta. Las voces de Maqueque. Clave. Amazing musicians. So, as I said in the beginning, it was through you that I met Daime, and who can't not fall in love with this woman, right?
Oh,
it was
she's
through you.
unbelievable.
It was through you that I met Yisi, who could not fall in love with her drumming, and so on and so forth. So how was it that you came across this great group of women and formed Maqueque?
Well, Larry and I think it was probably in the mid-90s, we started a foundation called Spirit of Music. And we actually took a visit. We were at the Jazz Festival. I think it was probably like 93 or 94, maybe 94. We went to the Amadeo Rodin School. The great bassist Carlitos de Puerto, his mom, the daughter, his little sister, was at the conservatory there called Partula, and we went to hear the students play early in the morning, and there was probably about 14 flute students, and they were all just like so marvelous, so good. And their instruments were dreadful. So we started, when we returned to Toronto, we started this foundation and started raising money for instruments. And we, for the next few years, took technicians and instruments and supplies to various conservatories right across Cuba with these technicians that would work on them. So we were engaging with the conservatories. There's 25 conservatories in Cuba, and a lot of them, a lot of young women in them, like, half, maybe more than half are female. And when we would be out at these jam sessions or hanging around at the jazz festival, we never saw any of the young women with their instruments. And they got a good 15 years of musical training, and then they just seem to hang out with their boyfriends that are usually musicians, and watch their boyfriends play. And so I would often be the only woman at a jam session playing, and I'd see some of these girls that I was with in the daytime, and they didn't have their instruments with them. And I kept saying this, mentioning it to Larry, and he finally sort of said to me, "Well, do something about it. You do something about it." It was really his idea. We realized that all these wonderful young musicians had come through Spirits of Havana.
Mm-hmm.
They were all guys. There hadn't been one woman. And so it was a timing thing. Finally, he said, "I think we should try a project." And we were on what's called a jazz safari in Cuba. So this would be 2014. I think it's 2014. And jazz safari is like the radio station does, like a trip to Cuba, and the donation, part of the money goes to the radio station, but part of it pays for this trip to go down to Cuba to either do the jazz festival, or it was at that point to be a part of the jazz festival. So we took this group down, and I met Dimey in the cigar bar. She was in there singing, and she was there in the hotel that I was staying at, and there was not many people. She was just in there, I invited her that later in the early evening to. I was doing like a special event for the donators to the radio station, Larry and I were the hosts of it. And I invited her. Bobby Carcassess is coming, and I invited Yussi and Jacek Manzano, wonderful trumpet player, and we were gonna Bobby Carcassess, I think, was at that. Roberto Carcassess too. So I invited her to come and sing, and she was really wonderful. She was so good. And even when I heard her a few hours earlier, I thought this old soul voice in this very young woman, quite remarkable. And so after that, she was great. And I went back we were back in Toronto, I guess it was May, and I was involved in a fundraiser that happens every year that raises money for women's shelter. And I convinced them to allow me to bring her, because I was the band leader, and usually we backed like a comedian and two other women in the show. And I said, "Look, I've met this young singer. She's really marvelous, and there's a large Spanish-speaking community in Toronto, and which you need to, you are working with. So let's bring her." And they said yes. And she came, and she brought the house down. So and she stayed with us in our house that May. And shortly after that, Larry said, we sat down with Dimey and said, let's do a project. Do you think we can find some women that, and do a project? And I really expected it to be a one-off. So we went down there, we kind of auditioned some people quietly, looking at who was going to be, because in my mind and Larry's mind, that Makeke had to be like the girls had to be eager to want to play jazz, because that's primarily we're a jazz group. You have to be able to improvise or want to improvise. And so we formed this group with the players. Yusa was in on the early mix, and she was a big part because she was a pretty strong performer. And Daime and young, she was actually a bassoonist, Celia, who's now in Las Vegas, but she came in on broken bass. That's another story. But she borrowed a bass and was broke. And, and we went into like 2 different studios, and I think actually before that, Daime came up to where I am right now in this cottage, and we wrote for a week. We wrote some music together. She worked on some stuff. I worked on some stuff. And then we met in Cuba with the players, and that was a hard record. That was really not easy because everybody was at very, very different levels. Our wonderful piano player, Diana Olano, was a classical pianist, and she had very little improvising skills, and piano was broken in the studio. And it just, there was a lot of issues, but that record ended up getting a Juno.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
Not that awards are everything, but they still
Sure,
give
no,
you a
but
little,
there's an
it gives you a
acknowledgement.
little nod.
There's an acknowledgement.
Yeah, it gives you a little something to work with. Yeah. So after that, it was a lot of work, that record. But from there, then we invited the group to go across Canada, and we did a tour across Canada, and people really responded wonderfully to it. And,
so this is the group we're talking about back then. That was the first group. That's the group, the first group that was touring with you.
Yeah,
right there.
that's so great to see that.
Yeah, and then of course the album, which that was the first album, which was then followed by the second album, Odara. There were a few changes occurred there, and then of course we fast forward to where we are today, which is interesting because on this album, I remember when we saw you perform last year, the singer blew me away. Again, another great singer, and I was okay. Where did Jane find this singer? Tell the story about this young woman who sings for Makegana.
That's nice. Thanks, Jose. So Joanna Majoko, she's very interesting. Larry actually saw her before me and then said, check the singer out. She was on Facebook, and she was sitting at the piano, and she was singing along with Charlie Parker solos. And her pitch was really good, and her phrasing, and she was just like, it was beautiful what she was doing, and it was like, is she? And I think at that point she might have been in Winnipeg, but which is in the middle of Canada, Winnipeg, Manitoba. But her background is very interesting. She was born in Zimbabwe, so her dad is from Zimbabwe, and her mother is German, and from Zimbabwe. No, wait. She was born in Germany, and then then her father took the family back to Zimbabwe. So she grew up in Zimbabwe till she was 15. And then the family, he's a metal specialist. And I guess he got a job in northern Manitoba, a place called Flim Flom. Flim Flom. Just like how it sounds. Flim Flom. Fargo, Flim Flom. Except really cold, hillbilly. And so she goes from Africa to this godforsaken place. And she's 15 years old, and she's in high school there. And finally she gets through that, and she then goes down to University of Manitoba Jazz Studies program. So she finished her jazz studies program there in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and then she moved to Toronto, and we found her in Toronto, and I had there was changes in the group with the vocalist, and she very quickly, I called her and said, like, I have a tour in, I think it was 3 weeks, maybe it was a month, 3 weeks, that short time. Could you get this music together? And she got this music together. And there's been she's just a wonderful vocalist. Like, I just love her whole,
her soul. Yeah. No. Yeah. I love.
And she worked, the girls love her. Like, she's brought a whole new, at first they were like, They were kind of like Cuban snobby, you know, like she's not Cuban and she doesn't speak Spanish and she's like and this and that. But now she's just like, they all adore each other and it's beautiful.
She's great. She's fabulous. So you mentioned that one of the original members is now living in Las Vegas. Who would that be?
That's
Did you have a question?
Celia. So she was,
Celia.
she's the bass player and she's working sort of with a alternative group. I really hope that she pursues the music, but she's, she's she was a classical bassoon player and she somehow got herself on the record and she didn't even own a bass. And she went and borrowed this bass. And when it came time to mix the record and we were sitting down with an engineer, he just kept, in Toronto, he just kept saying, God, the bass sound, like, I don't understand what's happening with that bass sound. And I found out after many hours of tweaking that bass sound that she was playing a broken bass.
C'est la vie. Yeah. The challenges of the music business. So Jane, we still have a little bit more time if you don't mind hanging out for us.
I want to thank you, Jose.
Oh, no, we have more time. And we have more time.
I want to thank you just for like you put an incredible amount of work into this show. And I just want to say, Larry and I just feel really honored for the acknowledgement and the time that you put into, what we've done, because you don't always get this opportunity to talk about yourself so much.
Oh, thank you. No, for me, it's an honor just to have you here. You kidding me? We're big fans, Davina and I, and in many ways, because again, I connect. There's a synergy of what you do with how my life has developed over the last 6 years because of my health, and the music piece is always what keeps me sort of like moving in the right direction. So there's that connection with your music. So we're going to hear a cut from this album, your latest. This one is the title track. Talk to us about the title track.
Okay. Well, this piece is written by, So this piece is written by Dana Olano, and she wrote this in her house. She lived, she's now got her own apartment, but she was living with Larry and I for, oh my goodness, I guess it would probably be a year and a half. We felt it was important for her to, being as talented as she was, and that she really needed more exposure to the materials to develop as a jazz musician. And I've got this incredible, record collection because of Larry, and music books, and just a lot of more stimulus in terms of learning this type of jazz music. And so she has been living with us, and she was working on this piece for quite some time, and we started to play it together and developing it. But it's her composition. Then we were on the road, and we weren't performing it on the road, but we were rehearsing it at sound checks and stuff. It happened to be in Tulsa at the Woody Guthrie Museum, which is quite a spectacular museum. If you ever get to Tulsa, it's a small museum, but very, very, very well done. And I had no idea, how I loved Woody Guthrie, but I didn't realize how profound a American master he was. Anyhow, when I left that museum, I just had these words going through. I felt like it needed some lyrics in towards the end of the piece. And with that's when the words came out of that museum from that visit. I'm trying to remember what they are. Now you're on firm ground. Whose side are you on? Whose side are you on? Now you're on firm ground. And I posed those to Dana, and she really liked them, and so they were incorporated into the piece. But I think Dana has just become a really spectacular composer. She's just writing great music.
Well, here's the tune. Let's hear a little bit of it. On Firm Ground, Tierra Firme, Maqueque. Now, whose side are you on is the question that you asked, right? At the end of the song. But it's also very much a prelude to Monkey See, Monkey Do, which is the cut that we're going to end the show with. So you've been described by many, and you've shared with us some of your experiences of your activism. But I would say that your activism goes beyond just the social issues of our day, right? You spoke about a women's shelter, etc. I think your activism through your music and your performances touches on the reality that we can't be, we can't sort of like distance music and culture away from the political realities that we go through every single day. In your case, you're able to travel the world as a musician, so you can see and experience different countries and governments and people and societies and cultures, et cetera, et cetera. You've been traveling to Cuba for so many years, so you've seen that firsthand. You've traveled the United States as a Canadian. You've seen that firsthand. You are north of us, part of North America. I wrote a piece yesterday sharing the liner notes from our dear friend John Santos when he speaks about the Americas, and he speaks about New Orleans, and he speaks about the Caribbean and whatnot, and the drum, which you mentioned. Talk to us, if you will, as we go into Monkey See, Monkey Do. That moment as a musician where you said, I'm not just going to share my passion for music, regardless what the genre is, but I'm going to make a statement. When did that happen? Hold on a second. Listen. Whose side are you on?
If I'd like to also, I'd just like to mention Nikki D. Brown for any of the listeners out there. She's a special guest on our record, and she's in Toledo, Ohio, and she plays the sacred steel guitar with a family band of sisters and cousins. And she's a real force. I mean, her music has mostly been only for church. She's very dedicated to her church. I think this was like her first venture doing something that was like really outside of what she normally does, but she's just a spectacular talent. And so in a way, like I'm partly mentioning that because that's somebody who her music is totally, her music is to connect, with what's happening above her. And that's a very deep relationship that she has with music and her spiritual journey. And my feeling is that I never, if I have any, and I know Larry does too, any opportunity as a musician to assist in any way with my music being connected to help out, to make, if it's raising funds, if it's bringing awareness to something, I'm always that is like a bonus, because I feel, I do, honestly, like as you mentioned, I feel privileged to be able to, or have been, but it'll happen again, but to be able to go somewhere, travel as a musician, it really is a privilege.
Oh yeah.
Just pointed that out again. And then be able to leave. Sometimes you go into places, like Cuba is one of them. You go into a place that is very, in a lot of ways, suffering, but you're able to bring something to the music, and you're to the people, and you're meeting other musicians, that are in that region or of where you are, and you're able to leave, and you're able to come home. I'm able to come back into Canada and go, wow, was that ever an incredible musical experience, and how and be able to really digest it, but be in a safe place. And so it's an easy thing to take for granted, and I'm really glad you just pointed that out, because the travel issue, now that we can't travel, it is, especially for the girls in Cuba, they're going crazy. And this has been something that they have really enjoyed. They've gone places that they, I think, never would have imagined that they'd been, and me too. And they've
Yeah.
taken me, because of them, I've been able to go along with the ride collectively. And because of Larry, assisting and helping to make this thing happen, like we're all working towards a goal. And then, but then there's a bigger goal. There's a bigger goal than just your own self gratification. And if it can go farther to something else, it's such a bonus.
Well, that is appreciated by us. And monkey see, monkey do is more than just monkey see, monkey do. Talk to us about monkey see, monkey do.
Well, yeah. Well, that kind of, I remember that term when I was a kid. Like, if you saw somebody, I just got a chocolate bar, I think I'm going to go get a chocolate bar. There's a very simple, childish kind of thing like that. Often the girls would I would watch them in the band room, and somebody would go grab a piece of ham and then put it on a piece of bread, and then next one would go, hey, yeah, that's a good idea. And then all of a sudden they're all putting ham on bread. So that's a very simplistic way of thinking about it. Yeah. But also the other part, there was another childish memory that came out with that, which was when I was a kid, my mom would never let me copy. Coloring books were not really encouraged. Sometimes they would be around, but I was always to draw by hand and try and come up with my imagination or do something that originated from me. And when I was very small, in grade 1, there was this kid that kept copying my picture. Like everything I was drawing, she was drawing the same thing, copying my pictures. And this is grade 1, and I got really, really upset. I started crying, and I put my hand up to the teacher and made the teacher come over and tell her to stop copying my pictures. And the teacher wouldn't do it. She would not discipline this kid. She was like, "Oh, she can do it if she wants." And I would just remember being very upset about that because it was not how I was brought up. And then it spirals into just what we are as a group, thinking that, it's very important it's more fun to be original. It's better not to copy somebody else's style. Try and come up with your own thing, because in the end, it's much more fun. Life's too short to be just sort of copying what somebody else does. Try and be your own person and come up with your own thing. It's not a big, deep message, but it's just sort of a fun.
Well, it's got connotations that go further than that. There's a question by my friend Bongo Slap 1013. Who is Larry? So Bongo Slap, maybe you weren't around when we started this show. Because he said, is Larry going to make a cameo appearance? Larry is not with Jane. So once again, let's introduce Larry to the audience, because some may have come in late and they missed the Larry connection with you. So who is Larry? Please introduce him, even though he's not with us.
So Larry and I, he's my husband. He's a trumpet player, and he's the producer of all our recordings. I guess we have 25 recordings out now. So he's produced pretty much all the recordings. He's played on some of them, but most of the time he's the guy who comes up with the creative concepts and makes them happen. So
when you hear her talking about Larry, Larry's her husband. Larry plays trumpet. Larry has been part of her professional career as well, with the music, the recordings, the bands, the performances, et cetera, et cetera. So that is the Larry that we're talking about, my dear Bongo Slap friend. Okay.
That's a great name. Wow.
Bongo Slap.
Bongo Slap.
So as we leave, Jane, this has been a challenge, right? COVID-19 has really flipped things over. I keep saying to folks, when we went to sleep on December 31st, when you were in San Francisco saying goodbye to 2019, welcome 2020, the last thing in your mind was that your tour for a year and a half was going to be put on hiatus. Troops, stop, no touring, because of a pandemic that would impact the whole world, disrupt the whole world. That was the last thing in your mind. Same thing here in the United States and then the world. Little did we know that after Memorial Day that there would be an incident that would be watched on video. And in many ways, I believe because of pandemic COVID-19, we were home watching it, in which a police officer, ends the life of George Floyd, which therefore then becomes a catalyst for once again Black Lives Movement becoming then part of what is now very much part of society, right? So with these two disruptions in mind, and by the way, Bongo Slap is a dear friend of ours, David Romero in Vegas, and David Romero. So he's Mr. Bongo Slap. So these two disruptive moments have impacted our day-to-day lives. One on the health issue and one on the social, political, cultural issue. And as we move forward, of course, we have no idea what the new reality is going to be in 2021 as far as here in the United States, as far as where will we be with regards to pandemic, and as far as where will we be as far as society with all the issues that are confronting society on the part of, race relations or non-race relations, et cetera, et cetera. But the one thing that I will say is that you and all of your colleagues in the music world, and regardless if you're musicians, if you're dancers, if you're poets, if you're artists, if you're actors, if you're writers, if you're painters, whatever expression that you have as an artist, you are the ones that during this period of time, I can say unequivocally, have been the ones who have brought light to each and every one of us. And it's because of that I think we get strength. I think we get centered. I think it is what inspires us, and I think is what gives us hope when things are darkest. And for that, I will always be so thankful for you, as I am for Larry and the band members, Makeke, and just that whole brethren of people who are part of this, I won't call it movement, but part of this fraternity, if you will, of artists, people who are in the arts. And they can be dancers, they could be whatever, but you're in the arts. And in many cases, I was thinking earlier what I mentioned, that I was reading this piece written by somebody, I can't remember who made mention of the fact that he had not seen any art expression in the last close to 4 years at the White House compared to what we've seen in the past, and particularly what we saw during the Obama years, right, where art was always there. And I made a mention.
Incredible.
Yeah, where art was always there. Art was very much part of it, regardless of what kind of art it was. It was there. It was very, it was like, that is part of our fabric of who we are. And so as we're living this moment in time where there are some sectors of society in the world where art is sort of like, what? Art? Why are we paying attention to art? I thank you for your art. I thank you for your contribution to the souls of all of us. And I thank you for your spirit of Havana and a spirit of Makeke. So thank you so much for being part of the show today. You don't know how much this means to me.
Well, I don't know what to say. I mean, because we so dearly need you, and we need a million people like you. And I just thank you so much for putting so much time into this, and it gives us a lot of energy to keep doing it, because sometimes you just you plateau, and right now there's a lot of plateauing. There's really it's hard for everybody to keep their spirits up, and you kind of feel like, I don't think I'll ever write another piece of music. But that's not so. You keep it you keep our spirits strong by just presenting the music, because without that, this music would be lost. We need listeners, right?
Yeah.
So that's what motivates me to know somebody that's going to listen to it.
So a few folks want to say thank you to you. Mary Kent says the following: thank you, Jane, for opening your heart to us. It was very cool to hear about your origins and how everything evolved. Continued success on your new ventures. Mary Kent. Ceci and Johnny, that uniqueness you acquired early on is transmitted to your music. That is absolutely amazing experience. Thank you for sharing your talent and time. You rock. Bongo Slap gives you a round of applause. Our dear friend David Romero. Mara Lawity says, this has been a great interview. Excellent questions with rich answers. And then Bongo Slap says Jose needs to be cloned. Well, okay, thank you.
You'd have to be cloned.
I got to
Yes.
be cloned. Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. Okay, we'll clone me. I don't know how we're going to make that happen. But in any case, we love
It can
you.
happen. It can happen.
Okay. We love you. We want to wish you peace, blessings, ache. As always, give my regards to Larry. Look forward to the day that we can see each other and embrace in a hug. And as we leave, I'm going to share two photos. This one, of course, is with somebody who's dear to your heart as well. Let me see if I can find it. I hope I can find it. Here I am.
That was
saying
great
I
to
have-
see that picture of Fred.
Here's one
What a-
with Bob Blumenthal, our dear friend Bob
Oh,
Blumenthal.
Bob.
There you go.
Yeah.
And our wife Divina. And then, of course, I dedicate today in memory of our dear Fred Taylor, who was so important.
He was the greatest.
Yeah, he was. He was. I owe
Sweetheart.
him a lot. Owe him a lot. But thank
He
you, my dear friend.
introduced me to you.
Yes, he did. He was the one. And wait a minute.
Yeah.
As the
I
music
wouldn't
is
know
playing in
you
the background,
without him.
before you go, so tell us about Makeke playing the Newport Jazz Festival as we leave.
Okay. Well, that was you have certain career highlights, and that was definitely one of them. Of course, knowing about, the great records with Ellington and Mingus and all the people, the history of the Newport Jazz Festival, one of the oldest festivals in America. And anyway, for years and years, probably the last 10 years, especially, I hope to play Newport. I hope we can play Newport. And finally, it happened, and it was a great experience. We were in a heat wave, so it was brutal. I was just, I was so soaking wet. My hair was like flat against my skull, and I was soaking wet. A pad fell out of my horn because of the moisture. The horn was so wet with the sweat coming off my hands, and I kept looking over at the girls. And they were perfectly dry. not a bead of sweat on any of them. And I was just like, I don't get it. Is this an age thing? What is it? But anyway, it was a great show, and we were just like all flying so high after it.
Yeah. No. Well, congratulations on that. Looking
Thank
forward to seeing you again, my friend. Be well. Stay safe.
Yeah, you stay well, Jose, and thank
Okay.
you so much again.
Thank you.
Best of the-
Appreciate you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Be well.
Thank
So,
you.
my friends, there you see our dear friend Jane Bunnett, who was with us during the day for this period of time. She hung out until 2:26, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that it brought peace, love, and happiness to your hearts, and joy and harmony to your lives. Tomorrow, Andrea Brockfield will be joining us at 4 o'clock, so it'll be another opportunity for you to enjoy a conversation, some great music by some very talented people. So this is going to be great. This is going to be great. And I love this one. And I want to thank Jane for that. And David says, sorry if I missed the question in case it was answered. Did you lose your jazz audience when you started playing Afro-Cuban music? That was a good question. Well, you know what? Wait a minute. I'm going to bring it back real quick. Encore. This is an encore question. Encore
Hanging
question.
around.
Did you lose your jazz audience when you started playing Afro-Cuban music?
No, I think we gained a new one. I really do. I think it enriched our fan base for sure. And I know that there was a lot of people that we took that because of in the end, because we kept at it. It's not like we just made like one or two Afro-Cuban records. We had I made the record. We made the record with Don Pullen and Live at Sweet Basil, and continued to work with people like Stanley Cowell and some real diehard jazz people. But then we were still going to Cuba and bringing more Cuban music into the realm of our musical lives, and I think it took a lot of people on a new adventure.
Yeah. So instead of losing, it was gaining. That was great.
I think
love
so.
it. Yeah, I believe so. I clearly believe so. There's no doubt about that. And of course, testimony to that is the fact that you would play someplace like Newport, and you would be able to introduce Makeke, but at the same time, the folks who are at Newport are there with their eyes and ears open to every single thing that's going to be played at Newport, because that's what festivals are like. So You're right.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you again. Thank you for the encore.
Thank you. Nice question.
Otra. Be well. Take care. Bye-bye. All right, my friends. So David says thank you. Awesomeness. Great show. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate that. And to all of you who are out there, appreciate the fact that you've been part of this conversation. And we'll be back, God willing, tomorrow, Sunday. I want to thank my beautiful wife, Divina, who has cooked dinner for us. And I'll be going upstairs to enjoy it with her company. And then look forward to mañana. And again, I want to remind you, we're 17 days, those of us here in the United States, 17 days from Election Day, which therefore it's our responsibility as citizens to do the right thing and to make sure that we vote. Okay? And in the meantime, make sure 6 feet physical distance, wear a mask, wash your hands as often as possible. This is not a joke. Ceci and Johnny in California, thanks for another fabulous Saturday. Thank you. Ceci and Johnny, look forward to seeing you mañana. All right? Be well, everybody. God bless you. Hasta mañana. Que Dios los bendiga. Cuídense. Salud. Chao. Paz. Bendiciones. Y aché. Y un abrazo con salsa. Nos vemos.